Hello guys, welcome to this chapter. In this chapter, we are going to learn all about viewports. We are going to learn how to navigate through the viewports and how to configure viewports as well. So without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. Hello guys. I have gone ahead and created a small teapot object inside 3ds Max. We are going to learn how to create objects inside 3ds Max in the later chapters. But for this chapter, let us use this object as a reference for better understanding of this chapter. 3ds Max has two different types of viewports. One is a perspective viewport and another is an orthographic viewport. You can access these viewports by going to the top left corner where it says perspective. Click on the perspective. Here you can see the names of different viewports inside 3ds Max. They are top, bottom, front, back, left, right, orthographic and perspective. Now you can choose any of these viewports and the current viewport will be converted to that particular viewport. You can also see the keyboard shortcuts mentioned for the viewports. Now notice that the viewport right and the viewport back do not have any keyboard shortcuts. So if I click on the top viewport, I will go to the top viewport. If I click on the front viewport, I will go to the front viewport. This way you can access all the viewports that you choose or you like to go to. If I want to go to the right viewport, I can click on the right and I am in the right viewport. Let us go back to the perspective viewport. This is one way in which you can access the viewports inside 3ds Max. Let us learn another way to access the viewports. You can use or you can choose to access the viewports by using the keyboard shortcuts. For example, if I want to go to the top viewport, I can press T on my keyboard and I will go to the top viewport. I can press F on my keyboard and I will be on the front viewport. Now, as you noticed before, the viewport right does not have a keyboard shortcut, but if you want to access or go to the right viewport, press V on your keyboard and a menu will appear through which you can go to the right viewport. Plus, you can also go to any of this viewport by pressing V on your keyboard and choose whichever viewport you want to go. I can go to the front viewport or a perspective viewport. Let's go to the perspective viewport. Now we are in the perspective viewport. This is another way through which you can access different viewports inside 3ds Max. Let us learn one more way to access viewports in 3ds Max. You can do this by going into the top right corner of the viewport where you can see a tool called View Cube. You can access any of the viewports by using this View Cube. Right now we are in the right viewport. Now I can change this by clicking on the small triangle. Now you are in the back viewport or the left viewport or the front viewport. There is a small home icon on the top of the view cube. If you click on the icon, you go back to the perspective. Notice one thing, that if you are in the perspective viewport, when you are using the view cube, you are still in the perspective viewport. Now what do I mean by that? If I click on the front viewport inside the view cube, it shows me that the viewport, the object is in a front view, but we are still in the perspective view. If I change this to any other viewport, we are still in the perspective view. So this is something that you will have to keep in mind. But if we actually go to the top viewport by pressing T or by going from here to top viewport, and now if we keep changing the viewport, it will actually change So now we are in the front viewport. So when we are in an orthographic viewport, the view cube will actually change the viewports as and how we change. For example, now we are actually in the right viewport. But when we are in the perspective viewport and then we change to any other viewport, it does not change the viewport to that viewport, but it only shows the objects from the front point of view or to the right point of view. This is something that you will have to keep in mind. Let us go back to the home. Now, these are the few viewports, few ways in which you can access the viewports inside 3ds Max. Now let us learn a few ways in which you can navigate through the viewport. The first way is to use your mouse. To zoom in and zoom out the viewport, use the scroll on your mouse. Scroll forward to zoom in, scroll backwards to zoom out. To pan, click the scroll button and move your mouse. You will see the mouse pointer changes to hand cursor. This way you can move to the right or left, top, bottom, or you can pan the way you want. To orbit through the viewport, click on the Alt button on your keyboard and press the scroll button and move your mouse. This way you can orbit the viewport. This is one way you can navigate through the viewport by using the mouse. Let us learn another way to navigate by using a steering wheel. For that, go to the plus sign on the top corner, click on it, go to the steering wheel and click on toggle steering wheel. Now you will see a small steering wheel inside the 3ds Max viewport. Wherever your mouse goes, the steering wheel will follow. Now you can use this steering wheel to zoom in, click on the zoom and move the mouse forward or back. You can pan, click on the pan and then move the mouse the way you want. Click on the orbit and you can orbit the viewport as well. There are other few options on the steering wheel such as rewind. Rewind records all your movement and you can choose to go back and go to the position where you like, for example. So rewind has recorded the movement of your mouse or the things you have done in the viewport, and now you can choose to go to any of these elements or positions and start from there. Now there are other few options inside the steering wheel as center, walk, up, down, look. Wherever your mouse pointer is pointing currently, if you click on the center, that particular space will come in the center. For example, if I click over here and press center, so as you can see, this particular space becomes the center of the viewport. If I click again, you can see it becomes the center. Now if you go to the look, it will give you a feeling that you are looking up and down, right and left, the way we look as a human being. Now there is a walk. This will give you a simulation as if you are walking inside the viewport. Now you can do up and down as well. These are the few ways in which you can use the steering wheel to navigate through the viewport. Let's close the steering wheel. Now let's learn another way to navigate through the viewport. We can use the viewport navigation tools that are at the bottom right corner of the user interface. Here you have a zoom tool. Click on the zoom and now you can zoom in and zoom out. Click on the pan view, which is the hand icon. Now you can pan through the viewport. Now click on the orbit or orbit selected. Now you can orbit the viewport. Notice that we have a circle in the viewport. If you are rotating inside the circle, it will orbit like this. But if you rotate or if you move your mouse outside the circle, the viewport will orbit in a very different way. So you will have to keep in mind how this works. And it is better to orbit inside the center. These are the different ways in which you can actually navigate through the viewport. Now let us learn about viewport layouts and how to navigate through the viewport layouts. For that, go to the extreme right corner bottom tool that says Maximize Viewport Toggle, Alt+W. Click on this and you will see our viewport changes to a different layout where we have 4 different viewports inside the layout. Here you have a perspective layout, front viewport, and a left viewport. Now you can change any of these viewports to any other viewport as you have learned previously in the same chapter. I can go to this viewport and click on it and change this to a top viewport. Similarly, I can go to the left viewport and change this to the right viewport. Here, I can go to the front viewport and change this to the perspective viewport. I can use the navigation tools to any of these viewports as well. Notice whichever viewport is active has a yellow border running through it. Currently, this viewport is active. If I click on this viewport becomes active. Similarly, if I click on this viewport becomes active. Whichever viewport is active, we are working in that viewport. Now, you can maximize any of these viewports as you like. For example, if I am in this viewport currently, if I press on Alt+W, this viewport becomes enlarged. If I press Alt+W again, I go back to the previous layout. Wherever my mouse is, that viewport will become enlarged. If my mouse is in this viewport and I press Alt+W, this particular viewport will maximize, and if I press Alt+W again, we will go back to the same viewport. Notice how wherever my mouse is, that viewport becomes active automatically. So if I am on this viewport and I press Alt+W, this viewport becomes active and it maximizes. And again, Alt+W, we go back to the same viewport. Now, I can change the layout of this viewport by going into the center. When my mouse pointer changes to the crosshair, I can click and drag and change the layout of the viewport the way I want. In this way, you can choose the viewport that you want to work it, expand it as much as you want, and keep working in that viewport and have or view the other viewports simultaneously. Now you can also have different layouts which you can access by going to the left corner where it says create new viewport layout. Click on the triangle button and you will see a standard viewport layouts provided by 3ds Max by default. You can choose any of these layouts. For example, if I choose a layout that has two viewports, click on this. Now you will see that it goes to a layout where we have two viewports. I can go and click on it and choose another layout as well. Now we have a layout where we have 4 viewports, 1 perspective and 3 viewports on the left hand side. Now you can choose any of these layouts to work with, or you can delete them, or you can switch from one layout to another layout the way you want. Or you can also delete them by going to the delete button. Right click and delete tab. This way you can access different layouts inside the viewport or choose to work whichever layout you feel comfortable with. Now we can use the viewport navigation tools to work with all these layouts together. For example, we have a tool called Zoom All. If I click on this tool and zoom in, all the viewports start to zoom in simultaneously. And there is also another tool called Zoom Extend All. If I click on this, all the viewports will zoom in and take the entire space of the viewport as per the scene. So for example, if this viewport is zoomed out somewhere else, this viewport is zoomed out and this viewport is like this, whereas this viewport is something like this. Now you can see all these 4 viewports have the objects at a different space and different position. Now if I click on the Zoom Extend All the viewports will zoom in and take all the space that is necessary in each viewport. For example, if I click on this, you will see it will centerize the teapot and take maximum space for each viewport. For this viewport, this tool can come in handy when you are working with multiple viewports. Now let's expand this viewport and let's go to the home button. Now let us learn how to view the objects inside 3ds Max in different ways. For that, let's go to the default shading on the top left corner, click on it, and you will see the different options inside the 3ds Max in which the objects inside 3ds Max can be displayed. For example, if I click on the facets, you will see the teapot. It has lots of small polygons or squares in which it is displayed. If I click on the bounding box, now 3ds Max shows a box around the teapot and it does not show the teapot, it only shows the border of the teapot. If you go on the flat color, currently you will see the teapot in a completely flat color with no gradient information or no shading at all. Only a silhouette of the teapot is visible. If you click on the hidden lines, a teapot is shown in the gray with only the lines with which, or the polygon lines with which it's created. If you click on the clay, you will see a teapot in a clay material and it has a lot of nice shading information and definition of the teapot. There are also other ways where you can view the models inside 3ds Max by going into the stylized menu. Here you have graphite, color pencil, ink, color ink, etc. etc. These are little bit stylized options. For example, if I go on to the ink, you will see how it is shown as an ink and paint option. If I go inside graphite, you will see how it is shown as a graphite background and the teapot in it. So these are nothing but different ways in which you can actually view the models inside the 3ds Max. Let's go back to the default shading. Now there is one option in which you can change the background of the viewport. Click on the default shading, go to the viewport background. Here currently gradient color is selected. It means that the current background of the viewport has a gradient. For example, here you can see the top of the viewport is dark, while the bottom of the viewport is a little bit lighter. So the gradient is running from top to bottom, from dark to light. If I click on the solid color, your entire viewport becomes one single gray color. So this is also one way you can change the background of the viewport if you like to. Let us go back and keep it to the gradient color as well. Till now, you have learned the different types of viewports, how to access these viewports in different ways. We have also learned how to navigate through the viewport in different ways, how to use the viewport layouts, and we have also seen how you can view the models inside 3ds Max in different ways. Now there are also lots of tools inside 3ds Max through which you can modify the viewport. For that, we need to go to the views menu, go to the viewport configuration. Now this dialog box appears where we have lots of options about the viewport and modifying the viewport. You can also access this dialog box by going to the plus sign, click on the plus sign and click on the configure viewports. The same dialog box appears. Now this dialog box has a few tabs on the top. For example, background, layout, save frames, etc. If you click on the background, you will see the same options that we have discussed before about the gradient colors and the solid colors of the viewport background. Here we also have a option to choose to put an environment background, as well as you can choose a file from your computer to put in the background of the viewport, which we will learn in the later chapters. In the layout tab, you will see the different layouts that we have already learned how to access them inside. You can also inside 3ds Max. You can also access them from here as well. Save frames. We are going to learn about save frames when we are going to learn about camera and its settings. Region tab. We will learn about region when we learn about rendering. Statistics. We can learn statistics right now. Here you have a setup, polygon count, vertex count, frames per second, and other elements or other options as well. If I click on show statistics in active view and say apply, you will see at the top corner of this viewport, it shows polygons, vertex, FPS. So this is nothing but the number of polygons inside the current scene and the vertices inside the current scene as well. So this information can come handy when you are working on larger scenes and you want to know how many polygons are there inside the current scene. Let us turn it off right now. Turn off the show statistics inside the active viewport and say apply. Press OK. So now you can see there is no statistics shown in any of the viewports. Let's go back, go to the viewport configuration. Now go to the view cube. The view cube is nothing but you can change how the view cube is displayed inside our 3ds Max. Currently it is shown as a small. You can make it large by selecting the large and say apply. Now you can see the view cube is large. Let us go back and make it small again. So these are nothing but the different options where you can edit the view cube tool. Go to the steering wheel. Same with the steering wheel. big wheel, the size of the steering wheel, you can change the size of the steering wheel from here, or there are multiple options which are related to the steering wheel as well. Click on OK. And let's maximize this viewport now by pressing Alt plus W and go back to the home again. That is all for this chapter. Please go through the navigation and different ways and practice and explore the navigation tools inside the viewport. In the next chapter, I'm going to teach you how to create primitive objects, how to transform them and select them inside the 3ds Max. I will see you in the next chapter.